eruption, there are a few housekeeping issues which do need to be covered. Now firstly, for those of you who are returning to the main park after the eruption, please be aware if you are entering an active volcanic area, and it is very important for your safety to stay on the well-formed pathways and to follow the signage. Now in the 1800s, folks, it was estimated that there were about 130 active geysers in the thermal regions of Rotorua and Taupo. But sadly by the 1970s, that number had decreased to around about 15 or so. Now folks, we do believe that the Lady Knox Geyser is a part of an old ancient geyser field. Now we believe this because of all the large rock formations that we can see around this area here, particularly the large rock formation on your left. Now we do believe that that was once a very big geyser or hot spring. Now the story behind our lovely lady here actually starts around about 100 years ago or so. But back then this area was nothing more than a barren wilderness covered in light shrub and bush. And not far from where you folks parked your cars this morning was the prison camp. In fact, it was the first open prison in New Zealand. Now the prisoners who were sent there, well, it was their job to clear the land of the light bush and shrub and to prepare the land for the planting of pine trees. And in fact, most of the forests you see between Rotorua and Taupo, including this one behind me here, were originally started using prison labour. And it was a gang of those prisoners who discovered this local hot spring. But again, what they saw 100 years ago or so is not what you are seeing now. All that was here was a beautiful clear hot water spring with a little ledge around about so high around it. Now you get a pretty good idea on what this rock formation would have looked like, but on a much smaller scale. If you look to that rock formation over there, now if you look carefully folks, you will see a shrubby looking plant which is literally growing out of the rock. Now that is Manuka, or New Zealand tea tree, and its base marks the ledge of what would have been, back in those days, another hot spring. Now 100 or so years ago folks, New Zealand prison life was rather primitive. Those prisoners were about half a day's puppy horse ride from Rotorua, and they most certainly didn't have any access to the luxuries of life which we have today. But more importantly, they didn't have access to constant hot water. So it was a gang of those prisoners who thought it would be a rather clever idea to use the hot water from this hot spring to wash their dirty clothes in. Now that would save them the trouble having to gather firewood and to boiling water. So one morning, a group of those prisoners came down to this hot spring with their soap, their dirty washing and their scrubbing brushes. They dipped their clothes into the hot spring, they pulled them out, they scrubbed them up with some soap, then they dropped them back into the hot spring. Now what happened next was those prisoners got one heck of a fright. What actually happened was this hot spring erupted, so sending their clothes that way and the prisoners disappeared into the bush behind me here. Now we now know what those prisoners did. The soap which they used broke the surface tension of the cooler chamber of water in that natural reservoir below the geyser, forcing that superheated water from underneath to come up through those cooler levels and out through the top in an eruption. Now that is what we're going to do this morning, but instead of using soap, we now use a 100% biodegradable substance called surfactant, which has been chemically engineered to do the exact same thing to the geyser, but to leave no harmful contaminants in the environment or do any damage to our lovely lady here. Now very soon we will see bubbles starting to form around the top of the vent. As that hot water merges with the cooler levels, you'll see the water start to surge as she builds up into her first full eruption. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great, excellent. Now to get from something, folks, that looked like that to this, what actually happened was those same prisoners came back to this hot spring and they decided to build a chimney. Now the reason for doing that was purely for their own entertainment, because back in those days they didn't have access to TVs, videos, or any of that sort of gear. They had to create their own fun. So by piling rocks around the mouth of the geyser, forced that water into a smaller opening which made a stronger jet, which sent their clothes even higher. But then Mother Nature came along and she gave the geyser this white mantle using a mineral called silica. Now that's in the geyser water. Each time there's an eruption, water pours over these rocks, which the wind and the sun, which evaporates that water and leaves behind this distinctive cone-shaped colour which we are seeing today. Now the geyser is named after Lady Constant Knox. Now, quite honestly, in New Zealand's history, she wasn't all that important, but her father was, and he was a gentleman called Lord Ranfurly, and he was New Zealand's 15th Governor-General at that time. Now, in May of 1903, he was out here with his family visiting the local prison just to see how that prison was getting on. To mark the occasion of their visit, his daughter, the Lady Constant Knox, came down to the geyser here and she christened it herself.